Scientology could be called, well, you could call it a religion of religions.
So with the Black PR document on OT8, did you actually read that when you're doing it in the church?
No, it wasn't on the level. There's this guy named George White who said it was on the level. He claimed to have done it around the same time I did. It definitely was not on the level.
Because I heard they took it away after the first 6 months. They switched it.
I did it within the first 6 months, and it was not on the level.
No way. Hold on a second. This changes things. Because I thought that they had it there for the first 6 months. It caused too many people to go PDS, and they removed it after 6 months.
No, there's only one guy that I know of that says it was on it. There's a guy named George White, he's written a book, but it wasn't his real name, George White. It's George Whitus or something like that. Anyway, something about it's a sort of a Christian type 3 Christian. It's got all that stuff in his book that's in that Fishman document, the Antichrist and the promise of going to heaven in the OT8. It's type 3 type stuff, in my opinion. To me, he's the only source that says that was on there, and you can look up his book on Amazon. I forget his last name, but it isn't White, but it's WAWOTAEK. Whitek is his name, I think. George Whitek, WITK. Yeah, and you just read the description of this book, and you see it's very much like the Fishman document. I wouldn't be surprised if he wrote it. But I don't really know, but.
How soon did you do OT8 after it was released?
So, it was released in September. I was on the maiden voyage, but I didn't do it on the maiden voyage. I came back 2 months later. So I was within two and a half months of it being released. It definitely wasn't there.
And this guy, when did this guy claim that he did it?
Well, he's claiming it was removed after 6 months, so he's claiming he did it within the first 6 months.
But you checked the dates, did you?
On what? The document?
Of when he claimed he was doing it, and you...
No. I know he said he did it in the beginning, and then it was taken off later because it upset too many people.
What completions were at when you completed it? How many completions were they for OT8? What number completions?
200. About 200. Then I came back to LA, and then I went back and I was doing some courses. I was there for several months. I saw completion number 1,000. So I assure you, there was nobody on OT8 that was upset by some document.
Okay,
it just didn't happen.
Okay, but I think earlier in this interview you mentioned people were getting upset on it, but that was more because of the processing of it, and that they didn't fully get something flat.
No, I'm saying that they didn't get any lasting gains from it later on. They would never let somebody off the ship who wasn't happy with what they'd gotten off of it. You have to understand that. It's not like people going, oh, this sucks, I'm leaving, and they go, oh, yeah, you can go. Yeah, no. Nobody was upset about it. And I didn't run into anybody that didn't have a win on it. Maybe not as big as my win, but they had good wins. And I heard probably 200 success stories, people getting up and giving their success stories. And they were all good. Everybody looked good. Everybody looked very attractive, really. There were a lot of free theta in their space. But there were a lot of the people that did it were old. They were in their late 80s or even some in the early 90s. They had said that they were holding on to the body so they could finish OT8, and then a lot of them within the 6 months, they dropped their body. Some of them had bad accidents. Someone went PTS.
But what'd they go PDS to?
Well, something keying back in. They went back into their environment. They were happy on the ship. They did okay. They were routed out. They wrote a success story. You never get routed out if you didn't write a good success story and pass the exam. And they thought they had bad indicators. They put you right into a review and they get you fixed up. So I'm saying people went back they went back to Toronto, or they went back to England, or they went back to New York or something like that. And then, life started to not go well, or they got sick, or they had accidents, not everybody. But I think that's what it was. They started getting some complaints of people who had gone back home and weren't doing well. So that's when they started to screw around with it.
Now, hold on a second, though. So, do you think it's because they missed out on the first part of it, the first two steps, and that's why they ran into problems? And second thing I want to ask you then is,
and missed out on the first part, and didn't really get the full auditing EP. They got a key out rather than a real erasure.
Yeah, and did the church call you up? Did Free Winds call you up and ask you to come back and do it again 6 months later?
No, I never got a call back. I had a huge win. I think they were just calling back people who weren't doing well.
Okay, interesting. Wow.
Yeah, because they ended up getting up to about 3,000 people, I think. So there was about 1,000 after it was the last time I was on the ship. And then it kind of petered out because everybody that was on the bridge had gone up the bridge and they did OT8, and then there weren't any new people coming up the bridge.
Now,
so,
when you said that when did they get up to 1,000 people have done OT8?
That was within 6 months. It was like dozens of people coming and going every day.
Wow. So because I kind of thought that when they first released it, all these people, and they did 150 like real quick or whatever. But then after that, it was like, okay, well, they're all done. And then slowly just some people did it more. But you're saying that like for the whole first year, heaps of people were doing it.
There was a big waiting list. People were just waiting to come there. And because they only had a limited number of space. And so, because I went back, I think it was, what was the first couple of months of the following year, of 89. I think it was like January, February, March. I was there, and that was when they hit 1,000. So that was only 6-7 months after they started, and it was people every night. There would be 2 or 3 people giving success stories.
I heard about this idea of on the ship there being a section to keep the body alive in case something happens to the body while you're auditing it, or while you're doing it, you go exterior or something, and you leave the body. Something really, really out there. Is it true they have special medical sections?
No, that's not true.
Yeah, it sounds like a typical like rumor that someone would spread so that people on the lower bridge are like, "Whoa, OT8, so amazing."
Yeah, exactly.
They're like, "What?"
Yeah, I was part of the crew that picked up all the bodies at the end of the day.
So you don't full blown leave the body and go away from it, and they I don't know, just anyway.
Well, that's called doing a bunk, and that didn't happen. I mean, that's a different thing. That's when you blow.
No, but hold on a second. Let me say, do you operate an e-meter exteriorly while you're using it? Do you something to do with OT8 while to run it or whatever, and you're just not in the body or something?
Well, I mean, it's a gradient because to some degree you're not in the body.
I know what you mean. Yeah. Well, what about, is there any special e-meters that are designed to be exterior of the body?
No.
So there's no, in the whole of Scientology, there's no such thing as, or what about, I heard with the latest e-meters that the church has released, something I think that COB said, like, it's like to be used for when you don't have a body or something. I
have no idea. I have no idea what he would be talking about. I mean,
All right. Well, we'll start wrapping this up. So, what about allergy problems? Have you noticed that you can cure that with auditing?
well, there's a really good process that was developed between 53 and 56 called Remedy and Repair of Havingness. It's in a series of tapes called the Game of OT tapes. And at that time, LRH was researching auditing the genetic entity. And he developed a whole series of processes on how to audit the genetic entity. And a friend of mine kind of got into that and started auditing it and was really raving about it to me. So I studied it myself and I started, auditing it. And you can do quite a lot with compulsions, addictions, allergies, sensitivities with that tech. Now, that tech was abandoned in 56 because LRH said he didn't really want to spend. Again, it wasn't part of the main bridge. He says we need to make OTs, and auditing the body doesn't make OTs, so we're not going to be doing that anymore. And he didn't cancel it, but he's kind of like, we want to audit OTs, we want to audit the thetan, we're not going to audit bodies, So, but that whole body of tech is there. It's beautiful tech. It's fantastic. It works really well.
Do people who come and see you, if they want to do that, can they get it from you, or do you recommend it for some people with allergy problems?
Well, you'd have to. I mean, I don't know many people that have really ever even studied the tech, and they may have listened to the tapes, but they haven't really practiced it. But yeah, I've had people. I remember very well this one lady. I talked about this on one of my tapes. Is this guy that was auditing? He was like about 22 years old, and this guy was a really enthusiastic drinker. And he would get his drink on, he would drink a drink, and then he would have two drinks, and then he was gone for the weekend, And so he would black out. It's not a good scene, but he wanted some help with this. So we ran this. I had him, I ran the process on him quite a bit. No, maybe I ran it, I think, twice. We ran it like maybe half hour, 45 minutes both times, And this was like right between Christmas and New Year's, and then he was gone for like a month, And so I was really curious on what would happen, with this guy, especially over New Year's, And so he comes back, in 3 or 4 weeks, and sits down and I said, "How you doing?" And he starts telling me about all this stuff and blah blah blah. I didn't even mention any of this other thing, And I was thinking, that's kind of odd. And so I said, okay, fine, So he says, "Oh, and by the way," he says, "I don't know what you did in the last session, but," he says, "I went out on New Year's Eve. I was all ready to get blasted." He says, "I had a drink. Well, I didn't feel like drinking anymore." He was kind of disappointed.
Yeah. Yeah.
Did I get it back? So.
Hey, you know some interesting stuff about remote viewing, don't you? So I remember you mentioning to me when I spoke to you the other day, a little bit of personal data about Ingo Swann, was it, or Hal Puthoff?
Hal Puthoff, I met him and talked to him in 1969. He came down to do some services, and we were staying in the same building over off Temple Street. And nice guy, interesting guy. He had quite a few good conversations with him. I never met Ingo Swann, but I knew people who knew him pretty well. Actually, still know him. I think Al Puthoff is still alive. Ingo Swann died, but knew him all the way up till a few years ago when he died. Ingo Swann, and so they did all that research up there at Stanford Research Institute. There were other people that weren't Scientologists, but at least those two were.